ugly duckling.
The Ugly Duckling. One sunny spring day, a pleasant old farmhouse stood alongside a babbling brook. Along the brook were lush green trees and reeds, and a duck sitting on her nest, watching for her young chicks to hatch. She was beginning to tire of her task, for the little ones were a long time coming out of their shells. She couldn't leave them, and no visitors came. She missed grown-up conversation. Then one shell cracked, and then another, and from each egg came a living creature that lifted its head and cried, "Quack, quack." The ducklings looked around.
Oh, how bright the light is!
Wow! How large the world is!
Do you imagine this is the whole world? Wait till you have seen the garden. Mother returned her attention to the one unhatched egg. I wonder how long this will last. I am quite tired of waiting. By and by, an old duck paid her a visit.
Well, how are you getting on?
One egg is not hatched, but look at all the others. Are they not the prettiest little ducklings you ever saw?
Let me see that last egg. No doubt it's a turkey's egg. The turkeys can't swim. Take my advice, leave it where it is, and teach the other children to swim.
I think I will sit on it a little while longer.
Please yourself.
At last, the large egg broke, and a young one slowly came out crying, "Peep, peep!" The old duck had a point. This duckling was very large and ugly and not like the others. I wonder if it really is a turkey. The next day, the mother took her young chicks down to the water. She jumped in. Quack, quack! One by one, the little ducklings jumped in. The ugly duckling was swimming in the water too. Oh, that's no turkey. Look how well he paddles and stays upright. He is not so very ugly after all if you look at him properly. Everyone, come with me now. I will introduce you to the farmyard. Bow your heads to that old duck yonder. She is our elder and deserves respect. But don't mind the other ducks. The other ducks in the farmyard stared.
Look, here comes another brood. Oh my, one of them is quite ugly. What is wrong with you?
Leave him alone.
Yes, but he's so big and ugly.
I can't argue there. He is not pretty. But he is very friendly and swims even better than the others. I think he will grow up just fine. The mother duck stroked the ugly duckling's neck and smoothed his feathers. Still, the others did not care for him. So it went on from day to day. Even his brothers and sisters were unkind to him.
Oh, you ugly creature! We don't want to play with you.
Nonsense! I love you all. But the ugly duckling worried that he did not fit into his family, so he ran away. He flew until he landed in a large field filled with wild ducks, feeling very tired and sad. In the morning, the wild ducks stared.
What sort of a duck are you?
He bowed to them politely.
May I have permission to lie among the reeds and drink some of the water on the field?
I guess so.
Then 2 wild geese arrived.
Listen, friend. We like you very well, but you are so ugly. You are not one of us.
The duckling turned away his head to hide it under his wing, and at the same moment, a large dog passed quite near him. The dog went into the water without touching him.
How thankful I am for being so ugly. Even a dog will not bite me.
The ugly duckling ran over field and meadow until he reached a little cottage. Inside, he saw an old woman with a hen and a cat. The old woman welcomed the duckling inside. Her eyesight was poor, so she thought he looked just fine. The hen and cat approached curiously.
Can you lay eggs?
No.
Meow. Can you arch your back or purr?
No.
Then what's your purpose?
The duckling sat in a corner feeling sad, till the sunshine and the fresh air coming through the open door filled him with longing.
I am longing to swim.
Absurd idea!
But it is so delightful to swim about on the water.
Delightful indeed. You must be crazy. Meow. Swimming is for fools.
Alas, I don't seem to belong anywhere.
Then be off with you. No purpose but to suggest crazy ideas. Seriously. Goodbye.
So the ugly duckling left. He soon found water where he could swim and dive. Spring turned to summer, summer turned to autumn, and in winter the snow came. The ugly duckling shivered. One evening, a large flock of beautiful birds arrived. The duckling had never seen any like them before. They were graceful swans. As they spread their glorious wings, the ugly duckling felt a strange sensation. He stretched out his neck towards them and uttered a cry so strange that he frightened himself. The ugly duckling felt something he had never felt for any other bird in the world. He wished to be as strong and graceful as these. The winter grew colder and the ice froze. As night fell, the ugly duckling became exhausted and lay still and helpless, asleep under the snow. In the morning, he woke to feel the warm sun shining. He heard birds singing and saw that all around was beautiful spring. The ugly duckling powerfully flapped his wings and flew high over apple trees in full blossom. He saw 3 beautiful white swans swimming lightly over smooth water. He felt more strangely unhappy than ever as he landed near them.
Such royal birds. But they won't accept me, for I am so ugly.
The moment they saw him, the swans rushed towards him. He bowed politely, and with the hope that these regal birds wouldn't tease him like others had. As the ugly duckling bent down, he looked at his reflection in the water and finally saw himself for who he truly was. He was no longer a scruffy, ugly bird, but a graceful, beautiful swan with a long, elegant neck and strong, wide wings. The other swans welcomed him with friendly honks and stroked his neck tenderly.
I never dreamed of such happiness as this.
The ugly duckling swam back to the farmyard with his newfound family. He saw Mother Duck and cried out to her.
All this time, Mother, I felt like I didn't fit in. I am not an ugly duckling. I'm a swan. A swan!
She smiled at him.
You are a swan, and I will always be your mother.
Quack, quack.
The ugly duckling and his swan family made a home right there along the flowing river so that he could remain close to his devoted mother.
Quack, quack.
The end.
Chicken Little.
Chicken Little. Once upon a time, a little chicken named Chicken Little was pecking around the farmyard. She was a nervous little bird and easily excitable. She was always yelping in fright from even small surprises, and a single thing wrong would ruffle her feathers for days. So perhaps it isn't all that surprising what happened to her that sunny spring morning. She was alone, happily scratching in the dirt under the old oak tree, hunting for worms.
Screech, Scratch, scratch, scratch. Digging up some worms. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Oh, how they squirm.
Of course, Chicken Little even smacked nervously. Every few scratches, she would look up and peer around to make sure there was no trouble sneaking up on her. Of course, she never thought to look up. And trouble, loving to appear where you least suspect, tumbled down from the sky and clonked her right on the noggin. Fortunately, it was only an acorn, and it bounced off Chicken Little's head and rolled away under some leaves. Unfortunately, Chicken Little didn't see what hit her, and her nervous little brain went right into a tornado of a tizzy. She screamed and started running.
Oh no! The sky's fallen! It hit me right in the head! Oh no!
She was so upset, she didn't even notice the old hen, Henny Penny, until she ran right into her ample feathered backside.
Oh, my stars and garters. Chicken Little, what's all the fuss about sugar pie?
Chicken Little tried to talk, but the words all tripped over one another and caused a pileup in her mouth.
The sky! My head! Kablonk!
Bless your heart, child. Put a little molasses on that tongue and slow it down for me.
The sky is falling! The sky is falling! It bumped me right on the head!
When Chicken Little had finished, Henny Penny was wide-eyed with shock.
The sky falling here? Well, bake me a biscuit and put it in the garden shed. What do? We've got to find a place to hide, and we need to warn the others.
Together, Chicken Little and Henny Penny ran across the farm. The cows and horses wouldn't listen to their clucking, but they soon found Lucky Ducky washing himself in the pond. He was dipping underwater and then coming back up wet, picking at old feathers with his beak. Every so often, he'd tilt his head and scratch himself like a dog with his webbed feet.
Hey there, Mom and Miss. What brings you over to the pond today? I thought you'd be out worm hunting.
Well, put an apple pie in the oven and call me Sister Sarah. But there's no time for worm hunting.
What's that?
Lucky Ducky noticed for the first time how frantic his visitors appeared.
Is there trouble?
Is there trouble? The sky is falling. The sky is falling. It's the end. The end of us all.
When Chicken Little had finished, Lucky Ducky flapped himself right out of the pond.
The sky is falling? I'd say that is a right good amount of trouble. We'd better go and find a place to hide.
He looked up at the sky suspiciously.
Normally, I'd fly away, but that seems like a bad idea given the circumstances. Let's get running.
Together, Chicken Little, Henny Penny, and Lucky Ducky scuttled off quick as they could. They were still looking for a place to hide when they ran into Lucy Goosey. She was tending to her wildflowers, which means she was looking them over for the most luscious bulbs to eat.
Nothing better than a fresh spring salad.
Lucy smiled as she swallowed a particularly healthy flower bud.
Lucy Goosey, spit that out. The sky is falling. The sky is falling.
Chicken Little yelled so loud and surprised Lucy so badly she tried to scream and started choking on the flower instead.
Honk, honk.
Well, pick a peck of peppers and mail them to your Aunt Jenny. She's gone mad.
Honk, honk, honk.
The flower came flying free along with a crowd of coughs.
What? I haven't gone mad. I was choking. You surprised the feathers off me mid-bite. Now, what's the big emergency with the sky?
It's falling. The sky is falling. We're all gonna get squished.
Lucy Goosey honked in terror.
What do you mean? We need a place to hide.
That's what we were looking for when we found you.
So, let's stop jawing and get moving.
Together, Chicken Little, Henny Penny, Lucky Ducky, and Lucy Goosey made their way to the edge of the farm. They waddled under the fence meant for the cows and horses and started into the woods. They hadn't been going for more than a few minutes when they heard a sly voice from the bushes.
What a strange group we have here. Resting your feathers today?
Out walked Foxy Loxy, red and sleek with sharp wits and even sharper teeth. Normally, the farm fowl would be scared of a fox, but their panic had them in such a state that they didn't even think twice.
We don't have time for this! We have to run!
Chicken Little ran in circles around the fox.
The sky is falling!
Excuse me?
Foxy Loxy looked at the sky.
The sky is falling! We are going to be flattened, turned into pancakes, mashed potatoes, squashed squab!
You are making me hungry.
This is no time for food! The sky is falling!
Oh, yes, of course. I mean, oh no, the sky is falling. We'd better hide.
Well, jump on one foot and call me King Gravy. But that's what we're trying to do.
Do you know a place? Oh, I know a perfect place. Quick, follow me.
Together, Chicken Little, Henny Penny, Lucky Ducky, Loosey Goosey, and Foxy Loxy hurried off into the bushes. Foxy Loxy led them through a thicket to his den.
Here, quick, into this, safety hole.
It was a warm little burrow, snug and deep. He knew once he got the birds inside, they were as good as dinner. The birds caught up a moment later, and they peered into the fox's den.
We'll be safe in here.
Safe as safe can be. Just get in. Hurry now. It's almost time for, dinner.
Lucy honked gratefully and started to climb in, the rest right on her heels.
Wait!
A voice boomed from above.
Silly birds, the fox means to eat you.
What?
Chicken Little peered up into the trees. Above, she saw the old Rowley Owlie. He didn't live on the farm, not officially, but he visited often at night to eat any wayward mice. The other birds knew him as a wise and careful friend. He flapped over to them, perching proudly on a branch above the fox's burrow.
He wants to have you for dinner.
That's not true. I just wanted to keep you safe.
Yes, safe! Because the sky is falling, Rowley Owlie!
Chicken Little fell to the ground trembling. The owl shook his head and sighed.
No, Chicken Little, the sky is fine.
Fine! It fell and clonked me right on the head!
That wasn't the sky. It was an acorn. The squirrels hide them all winter, and they shake loose in the spring. Look!
He flapped and bounced on his oak branch. From forks and crooks and cracks in the tree, acorns pattered to the ground. An angry squirrel peered out from the tree hollow. He started to complain. Then he saw the owl and went right back inside.
See, Chicken Little, the sky is fine. Foxy was just trying to take advantage of your panic. It nearly worked, too. You were about to go into his home and be eaten.
Foxy Loxy growled and bared his teeth.
You haven't stopped me yet. I can still make one of these dodo birds into my dinner.
Chicken Little and the rest shrank in terror, but Rowley Owlie just looked bored.
You're welcome to try, but I wouldn't recommend it.
He flexed his feet, showing off his knife-sharp, hooked talons. Foxy Loxy looked from Rowley Owlie's talons to Chicken Little, then back to the talons again. He licked his lips, narrowed his eyes, and then scampered away into the bushes. Henny Penny looked shocked.
Well, pick my pears and teach a dog to vote. But that was close.
Chicken Little sighed with relief.
Yeah, thanks, Rowley. I guess I do get a little panicky from time to time.
The old owl smiled wisely.
Not a problem. We farm fowls have to stick together.
Then he flapped away after the fox, watching to be sure he didn't make any more mischief on the farm. Hoo-hoo! Hoo-hoo! Chicken Little and the others called out their thanks again, waving their wings, and then they all made their way back to the farm, safe and sound. From that day on, Chicken Little swore that no one would take advantage of her again.
Most of all, I'm going to panic a little less and think a little more.
And together, Chicken Little, Henny Penny, Lucky Ducky, Loosey Goosey, and even old Rowley Owly lived happily ever after. The end.
The Elves and the Shoemaker.
The Elves and the Shoemaker. There was once a shoemaker named George, who, through no fault of his own, had become so poor that at last he had only enough leather for one more pair of shoes. He hugged with wife Vera.
Hopefully this last pair of shoes will sell for enough money that we can buy food for the next week. After that, I don't know what to do.
Don't worry, dear. I know things are hard right now, but we'll figure things out together. We're a team.
Then she kissed him on the cheek and headed to bed. George cut the leather into the pattern for the shoes and intended to begin sewing them together the next morning. He followed Vera to bed and slept fitfully, worrying about how they were going to make enough money to stay afloat. The next day, he was preparing to sit down to work when he saw them. There, on his table, stood the shoes, all finished. He took them in his hands to examine them inside and out, and they were so neatly made that not a stitch was out of place, showing that they were done by a master hand.
Vera, did you learn how to make shoes and make these in the night to surprise me?
Vera rubbed her eyes sleepily.
Huh? You know that I think sewing is tedious and boring. Besides, I slept next to you all night. I know you were tossing and turning. I'm sure you would have noticed if I'd got up for a few hours to make these.
She turned the mysterious shoes over in her hand.
But whoever did make them did a very nice job.
George marveled at them.
They certainly did.
George and Vera were deciding whether or not they should call the police, since they'd obviously had some kind of intruder in the night. But before they could make a decision, a customer came in. Because the shoes pleased this customer so much, he paid more than the ordinary price for them. George and Vera decided not to call the police. With the extra money from this sale, George was able to purchase food for the week and enough leather to make 2 new pairs of shoes.
This was very good luck. If I can sell these 2 new pairs of shoes, we'll probably just be able to make our mortgage this month.
What a relief! Come and eat some of this delicious potato stew I've made.
George joined her for dinner. Before bedtime, he cut the leather into the pattern for the shoes so he'd be ready to put them together in the morning. Then, he and Vera went to bed. That night, they both slept much more soundly. The next day, George woke in a good mood and was about to go to work with fresh courage. But there was no need, for the 2 pairs of shoes stood beautifully finished on his table.
Vera, it happened again.
Really?
Vera ran to look at the shoes.
Whoever made these did just as nice a job as they did on the other ones.
Should we be troubled that someone is breaking into our home?
But before Vera could answer, customers came in. They found the shoes much to their liking and paid so generously for them that George and Vera would certainly be able to afford their mortgage that month, and they'd be able to buy leather for 4 new pairs of shoes.
I think perhaps instead of being troubled by whomever is breaking into our home and making shoes for us, we should be grateful.
I will bake some cookies to leave out.
Make enough for me too.
Then George cut the leather into the pattern for the shoes, so that just in case no one came in the night, he'd be ready to put together the new pairs the next day. But the following morning, George found the 4 pairs finished, just as he had the previous days. And the cookies Vera had made had been nibbled on. And so it went on. What he cut out in the evening was finished in the morning, so that he was soon in comfortable circumstances again, and at last was able to save some money in the bank. One evening, just after New Year's, George said to Vera,
What do you think of staying up tonight to see who it is that lends us the helping hand?
Oh, I think that's an excellent idea. Maybe we can find out which cookies they like best. I keep trying different kinds, but they only ever nibble at them, so I guess they must not like them that much.
That night, instead of curling up cosily in their bed, George and Vera lit a candle and hid themselves in a corner of the workroom behind the big display case where George put the shoes he was trying to sell. They tried to stay quiet, but they were so excited to see what would happen that they couldn't help but whisper and giggle to one another. This helped them stay awake. Finally, at midnight, they heard a rustling. George and Vera peered out from behind the display case and saw them. 2 tiny little men who sat down at George's workbench, took up the leather pieces that were cut out and set to work so nimbly, stitching, sewing, and hammering with their little fingers. In no time at all, the shoes were starting to take shape.
Elves! Georgie, they're magic elves. That's why they only nibble at the cookies. They're so tiny they can't finish them.
Look at them. They're so good at making shoes. They can do such detailed work because they have such small hands.
They look like they're freezing. Look, it's snowing outside and it's cold in here too. And they're just wearing those little shorts and shirts with no sleeves. Where are their jackets and socks and hats and gloves? If they're not careful, those tiny fingers are going to freeze.
Cold as they may have been, the elves did not stop working until everything was finished and the shoes stood ready on the table. Then they each took several big bites, for them at least, of the oatmeal cookies that Vera had baked for them. And then they ran quickly away. Vera and George were astonished, but also very sleepy because it was very, very late. So they too went to bed. The next day, Vera sat down at the breakfast table and looked at George.
I keep thinking about those little elves and how cold they must be. Do you think we could make them some clothes to help them keep warm? Maybe some pairs of long trousers and sweaters with hats and gloves and socks. I don't really like to sew, but they've done so much for us. It is the least I can do for them. And you could make them some little shoes with your scrap leather.
Excellent idea.
George unpacked his tools and they got to work. When everything was ready, about a week later, they laid out the presents on the table where they normally left the leather. Vera had also made some extra special cookies with icing and sprinkles, and they left those out as well. Then, George and Vera climbed back behind the display case where they had hidden before and giggled and whispered until midnight. When the elves first appeared, they looked quite confused. George and Vera couldn't hear anything they were saying to one another because they were so small that their voices just sounded like little twinkling bells. But from their hiding spot, Vera and George could just make out the wide smiles that were spreading on their tiny faces. They looked perfectly delighted. The 2 little elves put on their new clothes right away. Everything seemed to fit very well. They admired each other, and then they began to dance and skip. George and Vera could see them spinning in circles and hugging each other. And they beamed at one another, proud of the gift they had given to the 2 little helpers that had helped them get by. They watched the elves eat large mouthfuls of the special cookies, finishing less than half of one. and then they went on their way. It went on that way for a long time. The elves came and made shoes in the night, and George and Vera left cookies and little clothes for them. More coats and hats with pom-poms in the winter, raincoats and galoshes in the spring, bathing suits in the summer, and so on. The shoe shop thrived. George and Vera never had money trouble again, and the tiny helpful elves were always well fed and very well dressed. The end.
The Emperor's new clothes.
The Emperor's new clothes. Long ago, there lived an emperor who cared about nothing in life except how he dressed. He'd always say,
"The clothes make the king."
He spent enormous amounts of money on coats, trousers, and fancy socks. He even bought expensive underpants decorated with cute little bunnies. The emperor dressed in something magnificent every day and marched through the streets, inviting people to admire his beautiful clothing. Unlike other emperors, he spent no time helping the poor or building hospitals for the sick. Instead, he passed his days in his dressing room with tailors and seamstresses, admiring himself in the mirror. One day, 2 swindlers arrived on a ship, just in time to see the emperor parading down the main street. All around, people chatted about the emperor's obsession with clothes.
"This is our chance to get rich."
This was the first swindler, Roland, who was tall and lean and looked a little like a buck-toothed broomstick.
"The emperor will pay heaps of money for a new kind of cloth."
But we don't know how to weave.
That was the second swindler, Otto, who was squat and rosy as a red plum.
How can we give the Emperor something he's never seen?
Something he's never seen. Ha! That's it!
The next day, the swindlers visited the palace.
"Your Majesty, we've come to offer you our talents. We weave cloth of unparalleled beauty, and because we use threads of magic, the material possesses a unique quality."
The king was not particularly impressed with the men's ordinary clothing.
What quality is that?
It is invisible to any person who is not smart or skilled.
Interesting. Very interesting. All right, bring me a suit made of this magical cloth, and I will reward you with a chest of gold.
The 2 men bowed and left, and the emperor congratulated himself on his decision.
With this suit, I can determine which court members are wise and talented, and which are foolish.
The emperor gave the swindlers a grand room in his palace, and they carried in 2 looms with great ceremony. For many days, Roland and Otto pretended to work long and hard, running their empty fingers through the looms. They asked for fine silk and precious gold thread, but instead of using it on the looms, they stashed it away for themselves and continued pretending to weave. After several days, the emperor wondered how the magic cloth was coming along. He grew uneasy, thinking how the clothes would only be visible to those who were smart and talented.
What if I can't see them?
He decided to send his most trusted minister to go and see it.
My minister is intelligent and exceptional at his job. He'll be able to tell me how the cloth looks.
Meanwhile, the townspeople had also heard about the remarkable cloth and were aflutter with excitement to learn who among them was foolish. When the emperor's minister entered the room where the swindlers pretended to weave, his eyes flew open wide. He thought,
Good jibbity jibbers! I can't see anything at all.
Welcome, minister. Come, tell us how you like these rich colours.
And these intricate patterns. I'm speechless.
The minister moved closer to the looms, squinting his eyes in a desperate attempt to see the cloth that was not there. Rather than admitting he could not see it,
The minister opened his arms wide.
It is very beautiful. I will tell the Emperor how gorgeous this cloth is.
We are pleased to hear that.
As you can see, there's still work to be done. We need gold to buy more rare dye in order to finish.
The minister gave them what they requested, and again the swindlers stashed it all away to keep for themselves. They continued to pretend to work the empty looms late into the night. Not long afterwards, the emperor sent another trusted advisor to check on the weaver's progress. As with the minister before him, the advisor looked and looked, but could see nothing at all on the loom, because, of course, there was nothing there.
Isn't it exquisite?
The advisor, not wanting to seem foolish, also would not admit he couldn't see the cloth.
I see that it has excellent quality. I love it. Very elegant.
The town continued to buzz with anticipation about the wonderful new cloth. Everyone was talking about it. Finally, it was time for the emperor to see the cloth for himself. He and several assistants visited the room where Roland and Otto pretended to weave. When the group arrived, the minister and the advisor who had been there before swooned over the weaver's work.
Your Majesty, isn't it magnificent? These colours and patterns are divine.
They looked intently at the loom, thinking that everyone else in the room could see the cloth. The emperor stared at the empty loom. He blinked and rubbed his eyes and hoped he didn't appear too flustered.
It's breathtaking. You have marvelous skill. What fine detail.
Of course, despite their best efforts, none of the emperor's attendants could see the missing cloth either, but were all too afraid to let anyone know.
It's beautiful. Marvelous.
Your Majesty should wear a suit made from this cloth at the parade next week.
Everyone agreed, and the emperor appointed Roland and Otto imperial court weavers. Roland and Otto pretended to work right up until the night before the parade. They play-acted removing the cloth from the loom, cutting it with shears and stitching it together. Finally, they proclaimed,
The Emperor's new clothes are ready.
The emperor and his assistants came to the great hall to try on the new clothes. Roland pretended to hold up each piece of clothing, and Otto announced its name.
Here is the coat.
Roland held his empty hands in the air.
Here are the trousers.
These clothes are so delicate. It will feel as if you were wearing nothing at all.
If your Majesty is ready, we would be honoured to assist you.
The swindlers led the emperor to a mirror and pretended to dress him one piece at a time. When they were done, the emperor studied himself from all sides. Every angle showed him wearing nothing but underpants, which were blazing red with a pattern of little bunnies and the words Bun Bun on the rear. Roland and Otto worked hard to hide their smiles.
Magnificent! It fits perfectly.
He turned one last time so people would think he was admiring the clothing in the mirror.
Let us go.
It was time to start the parade. No one noticed as Roland and Otto took their chest of gold and slipped away. The townspeople lined the streets to watch the parade. Under a beautiful canopy decorated with flowers, the emperor strode through the city. All who saw him exclaimed,
What a gorgeous suit.
Isn't it beautiful?
Nobody wanted to admit they weren't smart or skilled enough to see the emperor's new clothes. Then a young boy piped up.
But he's not wearing any clothes. He's wearing bunny underpants.
The boy's father was embarrassed and quickly apologized for his naive son. But before long, whispers began to spread among the people as they recognized the truth.
The little boy is right. The Emperor isn't wearing anything at all.
He cared too much about his looks, and now he looks a fool.
The emperor looked down at his bare arms and legs and realized they were right. In his vanity, he'd fallen for a trick. He turned and hurried back to the palace.
his 2 young assistants running after him, bursting out in occasional giggles as the words "bum bun" bounced away before them on the king's underpants. Yet the emperor proved wise in the end, for he learned his lesson. Never again did he march through the streets to show off his clothes. Instead, he turned his mind to helping those in need and building schools for children. And through hard work, he won the hearts of his people in a way he never had with his fancy clothes. And if the people called him King Bun Bun now and then, it was fondly and never in his presence. The end.
Jacob and the Wise Man.
Jacob and the Wise Man. Jacob lived on a tiny farm with his wife, Ruth, and their 8 children.
Ugh, enough already.
Jacob, are you okay?
No! Ruth, the noise, the kids. Why is our life so terrible?
Terrible? Jacob, what is so terrible? His wife gave him a warm hug and kissed his cheek.
What is so terrible? Everything.
His wife had heard this before. She looked into his eyes lovingly and smiled. Really? Everything?
Yes, everything. All day we work and yet our house, it's so small. 2 bedrooms, 8 kids. And now Bubby, Grandma, lives with us. We're all piled on top of each other. It's no wonder the kids fight all the time. The noise, the mess. We need a bigger house, another bathroom, a better plough, something.
Now, Jacob, you worry so much. How about you go and talk to the wise man on the edge of town? Perhaps he can help.
The wise man? Of course. He'll tell me what to do. I'll see him later tonight.
Jacob's mood brightened a bit, and he kissed his wife.
Dad! Mum! What is it, son? Is everything okay? There's a shoe stuck in the toilet. A what? Oh, I'll be there in a second.
Later that day, after mending the fences, working the fields and feeding the animals, Jacob journeyed to the edge of town. There, he met the wise man.
Wise man, my life, it's awful. My family, we're so poor. My wife, my 8 children, and now Grandma. We all live together in one small house. It's fighting and nappies and bickering all day long. Today I had to pull a shoe out of the toilet. Oh, help me, wise man. How can I get more money, a bigger house, a better life? I'll do whatever you say.
The wise man leaned back, closed his eyes, and thought for a long time. Then he smiled, and his eyes twinkled.
Tell me, do you have any animals?
Yes, we don't have much, but we have chickens, goats, a few cows. Do you want me to sell some? Use the money to buy a new plough, perhaps?
No. I want you to take your chickens and bring them into the house with you.
You... what?
You heard me. Go home and bring the chickens into the house with you. All of them.
But how?
You asked for my advice. I have given it to you. Take it or leave it.
The old man had spoken. Jacob turned around, went home, and brought the chickens into the house. All of them. Jacob, what is going on?
The old man. He told me to bring the chickens into the house.
For heaven's sake, what for?
I don't know. Perhaps to get them ready to sell at the market. Maybe living in the house makes them more tender and we'll get a better price for them. Trust me, things will be better soon.
They weren't. In fact, now mixed in with the crying and the fighting and the work in the fields and the nappies, there were chickens everywhere. Chickens in the bed, chickens in the bathroom, chickens in the cupboards. After weeks of feeling miserable,
Jacob went back to the wise man.
Wise man, things are worse. Now with the crying and the fighting and all the work I have to do, there is clucking and crowing and feathers and chicken poo everywhere. Oh, please help.
The wise man smiled.
Bring the goats into the house.
Jacob was stunned.
Is the plan to sell them? Please tell me, does this make them more tender?
No questions. Just bring the goats into the house. All of them.
So Jacob did. All of them. Now, with the crying and the fighting and the clucking and the feathers and all the work to do in the fields, there were goats everywhere. Goats in the kitchen, goats on the table. A brave goat even climbed to the top of the bookshelf. After weeks of feeling miserable, Jacob went back to the wise man.
Wise man, things are just getting worse. Now with the crying and the clucking and all the work I have to do, there is this goat noise and hooves and horns and goat poo everywhere. Oh, please help.
The wise man held up his hand.
Bring the cows into the house.
No.
Yes, you asked for my advice. I am giving it to you. Bring the cows into the house. All of them.
And so Jacob did. All of them. Now, with the crying and the fighting and the clucking and the goat noise and all the work to do in the fields, there were cows. Everywhere. Cows in the living room, cows in the bedroom, cows in the kitchen. The whole house smelled and sounded just like a barn. Grandma was very displeased. The family lasted 1 week, and then Jacob ran to the wise man.
Wise man, please! Now with the crying and the clucking and the goat noise and all the work I have to do, there is mooing and cow bums and cow poo everywhere. Please, I beg you, help!
The wise man held up his hand.
Take all the animals out of the house.
And do what with them? Sell them?
You ask so many questions. Just take all the animals out of the house.
And so Jacob did. One by one, he removed all of them. First the cows, then the goats, and finally the chickens. That night, for the first time in a long time, Jacob and the rest of his family slept very peacefully. The next morning, he woke up and smiled.
There's no clucking, no baaing, no mooing, no fur, no feathers.
And best of all, Jacob, no poo.
There's so much room. I can stretch my arms. I can breathe.
Jacob hugged his wife and ran back to the wise man.
Wise man, you did it. With just my family in the house, it's so quiet, so roomy, so peaceful. It's amazing. Thank you so much.
The wise man leaned back in his chair and smiled.
You are a rich man, Jacob. A rich man indeed.
The end.